I sat at a long table in an attorney's office while my brother Garrett signed a document he believed gave him control of the family property. The attorney slid the page across, and Garrett signed without reading past the first paragraph. The pen scratched against the paper 3 times. That sound was the only thing in the room besides my breathing. Garrett noticed I had not reached for my pen yet. He asked if there was a problem. I said no. Then I picked up the pen and signed my own name. What Garrett did not know, what no one in that room knew except me, was that I had been waiting for this exact meeting for 14 months. Not dreading it, waiting for it. Every decision I made in those 14 months was made in preparation for what happens after his signature dries. I had already spoken to the buyer. I had already reviewed the terms. I had already moved the timeline so that his signature came first and mine came second. He thought he was taking control. He was just signing the permission slip for something I had already arranged. I set the pen down, thanked the attorney, and walked out. The waiting had never been the hard part. The hard part was letting him believe I was patient because I had no other choice. My name is David. I was 36 years old and had spent the last 8 years living 40 minutes from my father's house, while my older brother Garrett lived 800 miles away and called that ambition. My father's property was a 5-acre plot outside Medford that had been in our family since 1973. The house was falling apart slowly. The barn still stood, but the roof was soft in 2 places. The storage unit was a 20 by 20 metal building my father had put up in the 90s to hold everything my mother did not want in the house and everything he could not throw away after she died. I was the one who drove over on Sunday afternoons to help sort through it because my father could not manage it alone anymore. His back had been unreliable for 2 years, and he would not ask for help. He would just sit in his chair and look at the pile of things that needed moving and wait for someone to notice. So I just showed up. I moved boxes, cataloged what was inside each one on a legal pad I kept in the truck, and stacked what needed to go to donation in a separate corner near the door. My father watched from a lawn chair and occasionally pointed at something he could not bear to throw away. At the end of the afternoon, he said, "Your brother should be doing this." He said it the same way he said everything about Garrett. Not angry, just tired. I did not say anything. I just loaded the last box into my truck and closed the tailgate and drove home. I also handled the property taxes that quarter. Not because I was asked. The bill came in the mail on a Tuesday, and my father left it on the kitchen counter for 3 weeks. I saw it there every time I came over. It sat next to a stack of unopened mail and a coffee mug that had not been washed in days. Finally, I just wrote the check from my own account and filed the receipt in the folder I kept at home. I did not tell Garrett. I did not tell my father I expected to be reimbursed. I just kept the receipt and went back to my own life. That same evening, Garrett called. Not me. My father. I was still there washing dishes when the call came in. I could hear my father's voice shift the second he answered. It moved into the register it only used with Garrett. Warmer, slightly more careful. The way a man speaks to someone he is quietly hoping will finally come around and stay for more than a weekend. The call lasted 11 minutes. I dried the same plate 3 times while I listened to my father laugh at something Garrett said about his job or his new car or whatever he was calling to report this time. When he hung up, he told me Garrett might come down for Thanksgiving. He said it like it was a gift he was offering me. I dried my hands and said that would be nice. Then I put the plate away and let myself out the back door. I had been doing this for years. Doing the work, paying the bills, showing up, saying nothing, while Garrett called once a month and got the warmer voice and my father's hope and the benefit of the doubt. I was not angry about it. I had stopped being angry somewhere around year 5. I was just watching, and I knew exactly what I was waiting for. The property was not going anywhere. Neither was I. I found a folder on a Tuesday afternoon while looking for the homeowner's insurance renewal. It was buried in the bottom drawer of my father's desk, tucked behind an old phone book and a stack of receipts from 2019. The folder was plain manila with nothing written on the tab. Inside was a printed email chain between my father and Garrett from 8 months ago. The subject line was the name of the property. I read it standing there with my hand still on the drawer. Garrett's final email in the chain said he had been thinking about the long-term plan and would like to sit down and talk when he visited next. My father's reply was a single line. "Whenever you're ready, son." I read that line twice. Then I read it a third time. I put the folder back exactly where I found it, pushed the drawer closed, and found the insurance renewal 2 drawers down. I did not mention the folder to anyone. Garrett came for Thanksgiving that year. He arrived the evening before, driving a car I had not seen before. Something German, something leased. He spent the first hour sitting with my father in the living room, telling him about a deal he was working on that he could not discuss in detail yet. I made dinner. I made the whole thing. Turkey, potatoes, green beans, rolls. The same meal my mother used to make before she died. When we sat down, Garrett took the seat at the head of the table. My father's seat. He did not appear to notice. He just sat down and started cutting his turkey. My father sat to his left. I sat across from both of them. Garrett told 2 stories over dinner. Both of them were about Garrett. One involved a difficult client he had managed brilliantly. The other involved a promotion he had turned down because he valued his freedom. My father nodded through both of them. I passed the gravy and said nothing. After dinner, Garrett cornered me in the kitchen while my father was asleep in his chair. I was washing dishes. He leaned against the counter with his arms crossed and told me he wanted to talk about the property before he headed back. Just the 2 of them. Nothing formal. I said sure and kept washing. He said he had some ideas about how to structure things going forward. "I think Dad's getting to the point where he needs a real plan," he said, "not just us handling things as they come." I agreed with him. He said he figured I would. We would talk before he left. He clapped me once on the shoulder and went back to the living room. He left the next morning without having that talk. He hugged my father at the door, got into the German car, and drove away. I watched him go from the kitchen window. Garrett had just signaled that he intended to shape what happened to the property, and I had said I would be interested to hear his ideas. Interested and cooperative were not the same thing. I had been watching him for 36 years. I already knew what he would propose before he proposed it, and I already knew my answer. I just had not told him yet. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Garrett emailed me a document. It was a draft property management proposal, 3 pages long, formatted like something written by someone who had spent more time on the margins than the content. The subject line read, "Property Plan, Draft for Review." I opened it on a Tuesday evening after work. I read it once sitting at my kitchen table. Then I read it again more slowly. The 3rd page had a section header that read, "Decision-Making Authority." Under that header, Garrett's name appeared as primary decision-maker. His name was bolded. Under his name, there was a bullet point that said he would have final say on all major expenditures, any sale or transfer of the property, and any structural changes to the house or land. My name appeared once, in a line about shared maintenance responsibilities. I would be consulted on routine upkeep. I would have no vote on anything that mattered. I closed the document and did not reply that night. I called my father the next morning. Not about the document. I did not mention the document. I asked him how he was feeling and whether he had given any more thought to the property plan they had discussed in the fall. He told me Garrett had been helpful putting some ideas together. He sounded relieved. The way people sound when they believe a problem is finally being handled by someone else. I said that was good. Then I asked if he had read anything in detail yet. He said not yet. Garrett was going to walk him through everything on his next visit. I told him that sounded like a good approach. Then I hung up and sat in my truck for a minute before starting the engine. I drove to the county assessor's office on my lunch break that same week. The building was old and the elevator smelled like floor wax. I asked for the property record at the front counter. A clerk with reading glasses on a chain asked if I needed help finding anything specific. I told her I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what was recorded and what was not. She brought out the file. I reviewed it carefully. Ownership structure, recorded liens, any filings from the past 3 years. Everything was as I expected. The property was in my father's name alone. There were no survivorship clauses, no transfer on death designations, nothing that gave Garrett any legal standing beyond what any son had. I photographed each page with my phone before I handed the file back. The clerk said everything was current. I told her that was good. That was what I needed to know. I walked back to my car and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes going through the photos on my phone. Garrett was walking our father through a plan that reduced me to a maintenance role on property I had been managing and paying taxes on for years. And my father did not know that yet. He thought Garrett was being helpful. I had the property record in my phone. I knew exactly what the law said and exactly what it did not say. Garrett had sent me his proposal. He was waiting for me to agree. I had not agreed to anything. I had just not said no yet. Garrett visited in February. He brought printed copies of the property proposal and sat my father down at the kitchen table. I was not invited to that conversation. I found out it happened when my father called me that evening to tell me Garrett had come by and that things were starting to come together. He sounded pleased, relieved. He said Garrett really knows how to think through these things. I let him talk. Then I asked whether he had signed anything. He said not yet. Garrett was having an attorney look at it first. I told him that sounded like a good idea and got off the phone. I stood in my kitchen for a while after that. Garrett had moved from talking to acting. He had sat my father down. He had presented his plan in person. He had mentioned an attorney. The timeline was no longer vague. 3 days later, I received a call from an attorney's office I did not recognize. The paralegal on the line said she was reaching out on behalf of a client regarding the property. She said they were preparing documents for an upcoming transfer of management authority. She confirmed my name was on the parcel record and asked if I had received any communication about the pending arrangement. I said I had seen a draft proposal. She said she would note that. She thanked me and ended the call. I sat very still after hanging up. Garrett was not floating ideas anymore. He had hired someone. He had a filing date in mind. He had not told me any of this directly. I had found out from a paralegal I had never spoken to before. That was how much I mattered in his plan. Enough to be on the parcel record. Not enough to be part of the conversation. That evening I called my own attorney. Her name was Carol. I had used her twice before for contract work. I told her what I had. The property record photographs from the assessor's office. The draft proposal Garrett had emailed me with his name bolded under decision-making authority. The notes from my visit to the assessor. The receipts for the property taxes I had paid out of my own account. And the paralegal call from that afternoon. Carol listened without interrupting. She did not ask why I had been keeping all of this. She did not ask why I had not said anything to Garrett. She just listened. When I finished, she asked one question. How much time did I think I had? I told her I did not know. She said, give me everything by Friday. I hung up and opened the folder on my desk. I had been preparing for this moment for months. Not because I wanted to fight, because I had watched Garrett my whole life and I knew exactly how he operated. He assumed no one else was paying attention. He assumed patience was passivity. He was wrong about both. But Carol had asked how much time I had. Garrett's attorney was already preparing documents. I had a folder full of evidence. Evidence was not action. I needed to move before the documents were filed. I started scanning receipts. It was Wednesday night. Friday was coming fast. I drove to my father's house on a Wednesday without a specific reason. I told myself I was just checking in, but I knew why I was going. I found him at the kitchen table with Garrett's printed proposal open in front of him. He was not reading it. He was just looking at it. The pages were spread out across the same table where I had washed dishes on Thanksgiving. I sat down across from him and waited. He said he thought Garrett meant well. I told him I knew. He said Garrett just wanted things settled. We both should want that. I said I did want that. He nodded slowly. Then he folded the proposal and set it aside. He asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. While the coffee brewed, I looked at my father. Really looked at him. I saw the tiredness in how he moved from the counter to the pot. The way his hand shook slightly when he poured. The way he had held that document not like someone evaluating a plan, but like someone who had already decided to trust the person who handed it to him. Garrett had given him something. A story about the future. A promise that the hard decisions could be made by someone else. My father was not choosing Garrett over me. I understood that in that moment. He was choosing to be finished worrying. He was tired. He had lost my mother. His back did not work. His sons lived in different worlds. He just wanted someone to tell him it was all going to be okay. Garrett had volunteered. That was a different thing than favoritism, but it changed nothing about what I had to do. It just cost me something to see it clearly. I drank the coffee he made me and talked about nothing important for another hour. Then I drove home. Carol called that evening with a preliminary read. She said the proposal as written would give Garrett unilateral authority to make decisions about the property. Refinancing, initiating a sale, bringing on debt, all of it without requiring my consent. She said my documented contributions created a credible, equitable claim. The tax receipts, the maintenance records, the years of work I had never been paid for. She said if I wanted to act on that claim, I needed to act before anything was signed. I asked her how long the filing process took once documents were submitted. She gave me a number. I wrote it down on the same legal pad I had been using for months. I sat at my kitchen table with the coffee from my father's house still in my system and thought about the way he had folded that proposal and set it aside. He was reaching for peace. He thought Garrett was handing it to him. I knew what I had to do, but doing it meant telling my father that the peace he wanted was built on something that was not real. That Garrett's plan was not a plan for both of us. It was a plan for him. I could keep quiet and let my father keep his peace. Or I could tell the truth and watch his face when he understood what his older son had been doing. I sat there for a long time with the phone in my hand and Carol's number on the screen. I had not called her back yet. I was still deciding whether I could do that to him. I called Carol on a Thursday morning and told her to file. I did not spend time on the decision. The decision had been made the moment I photographed the property record in the county parking lot. I had been waiting to be certain. I was certain. Carol said she would have the filing ready by end of day Friday. I said good and asked her to send me a copy of everything before it went in. She said she would. I hung up and sat at my desk for a moment. Then I opened a drawer and pulled out the folder. I had been carrying that folder around for years without knowing it. Now it was leaving my hands. That evening I wrote a letter to my father. Not an email. A handwritten letter on plain paper from a pad I had bought at the drugstore. I did not explain the legal filing in legal terms. He did not need legal terms. I told him what I had been doing for the past 3 years. The tax payments with dates and amounts. The maintenance calls I had handled without billing anyone. The storage unit. The insurance renewal. The Sunday afternoons. I named each thing plainly and moved to the next. I did not accuse Garrett of anything. I did not say his plan was a setup. I simply showed my father what the record looked like when it was written down by someone who had been there for all of it. I sealed the envelope and set it on the counter. I did not mail it yet. That same night, I called Priya, my closest friend. She had known about the situation for months without asking for explanations. I told her I had filed. She asked if I was okay. I said I had been okay. This was just the part where it became visible. She asked if my dad knew. I said he would. I wrote him a letter. She asked if I was going to send it. I said after the filing clears. She said okay. That was the whole conversation. No opinions. No advice. Just someone on the other end of the line who had been listening for months and was not going to stop now. I hung up and went to sleep. The filing cleared on Monday. Carol sent me the confirmation. I printed it, read it once, and put it in the folder with everything else. That afternoon, I walked to the post office near my office with the letter in my hand. I dropped it into the slot and heard it hit the bottom. I stood there for a second looking at the slot. Then I turned around and drove back to work. The filing was done. The letter was in the mail. Garrett was about to find out. My father was about to find out. And I was not going to be the one explaining it in real time. I had spent 14 months preparing for what happened after Garrett's signature dried. Now I was finally there. I sat at my desk and waited. Garrett called on a Wednesday evening. I saw his name on my phone and picked up. I did not say anything beyond hello. He did not ease into it. His voice was controlled but tight. The voice of a man who is angry and is still deciding how angry to let himself sound. He said he got a call from Dad's attorney that day. I had filed something with the county. I told him I did. He said without talking to him. I told him I talked to my attorney. He said that was not what he meant, and I knew it. I told him I knew what he meant. He asked what this was. whether I was trying to block the arrangement. I said I was establishing what my contribution to the property had been, legally and on record. He said I paid a few tax bills. I told him I paid every tax bill for 3 years. I had the receipts. Carol had the receipts. The county had the filing. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said I had been planning this. I told him I had been patient. There was a difference. He said Dad was going to be blindsided. I told him Dad got a letter from me that morning. He would not be. Another pause. Longer this time. He said I should have come to him first. I told him I came to him at Thanksgiving. He left without having the conversation. He did not respond to that. The call ended 60 seconds later. I set the phone down and looked at the wall. My father called the following morning. His voice was not angry. It was quiet in a way that was harder to sit with than anger. He said he read the letter. He said he did not know about the tax payments. He said Garrett never mentioned them either. I told him I did not tell Garrett. He asked why. I told him because I was not doing it for credit. I was doing it because it needed to be done. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he wished I had told him. I said I understood. I did not explain more than that. There was nothing else to explain. He had the letter. He had the dates. He had the amounts. The rest was just him sitting with what he had not seen for 3 years. I let him sit. We talked for another few minutes about nothing important. Then I let him go. That afternoon, Garrett sent an email to me, copied to my father and to his own attorney. For paragraphs, he accused me of acting in bad faith, of manufacturing a claim through selective documentation, of damaging the family's ability to reach a cooperative agreement. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Carol without replying. I did not defend myself. I did not correct his version of events. I did not copy my father on my response because I did not write a response. I just sent the email to my lawyer and closed my laptop. Garrett had lawyered up in writing. My father was caught between two sons who both believed they were acting in the family's interest. Carol had the email. I had not replied. Not replying was a choice. It meant Garrett got to frame the story for anyone who saw that thread. It meant my father read 4 paragraphs of accusation without seeing anything from me underneath them. I knew that. I let it stand anyway, because replying would have meant playing his game on his timeline. I had waited 14 months to file. I could wait a little longer to speak. But my father was reading that email right now. He was seeing his older son call me a liar, and I was not answering. I sat at my desk and wondered whether silence looked like weakness to him, the same way patience had looked like passivity to Garrett. I did not know the answer. I just knew I was not ready to give it yet. Carol responded to Garrett's attorney on my behalf. Formally, point by point, without hostility. She did not copy my father. She did not copy Garrett directly. The response was addressed only to opposing counsel, the way legal responses are supposed to be when one side has decided to stop performing for an audience. Inside the letter, every claim in Garrett's email was answered with a document reference, a dated receipt, an assessor record, a county filing timestamp. I read the letter before it went out. I made one change. I asked Carol to remove a line that characterized Garrett's conduct as strategic. She removed it without comment. I did not want to characterize. I wanted to be accurate. The law did not care what I thought about my brother. It cared what I could prove. I could prove everything. 2 weeks passed. Garrett did not call. I drove to my father's house on a Sunday. He was in the yard, raking leaves even though it was too early for leaves. I parked and walked over. We did not talk about the filing or the letter or Garrett's email. We talked about the storage unit, whether the last section needed to be cleared before spring. My father said he thought so. I said I could come back next weekend. He said okay. We sat outside for a while. A car passed. The wind picked up. Neither of us said anything about the thing that was sitting between us. It was not resolved, but we were both still there. He was not avoiding me. He was just not ready. I could wait. I had been waiting for years. A few more weeks did not matter. Garrett's attorney sent a revised proposal 2 weeks after Carol's response. The new version included me as co-decision maker on any transaction exceeding a threshold amount. It was not everything my filing had established, but it was not the original document either. The one with my name buried in a maintenance line and his name bolded at the top. Carol called and read me the relevant section. She asked what I wanted to do. I told her to send me the full document and give me a day. I hung up and looked at the proposal on my screen. Garrett hadn't moved. Not because he wanted to, because his attorney had told him he had to. The original plan was no longer viable. The filing had seen to that. Now I had a revised proposal on the table and 1 day to decide. I read it twice. Then I pushed my chair back and walked away from my desk. I needed to think about what I actually wanted, not what I had been waiting for, not what I was owed, what I wanted, because Garrett had just offered me something. Not everything, but something. And I had to decide whether this was the resolution I had been patient for, or whether it was just Garrett repositioning while he figured out his next move. I sat in the dark and tried to tell the difference. I could not yet. I reviewed the revised proposal with Carol over the phone on a Tuesday morning. She identified 2 remaining gaps, both in the threshold language. The way it was written would have allowed Garrett to structure a transaction just below the trigger point, keep it under the limit where my approval was required, and do exactly what he wanted without ever asking me. She read me the relevant lines. I told her to close both gaps. She drafted the language and sent it back to Garrett's attorney that afternoon. There was no dramatic counter, no lengthy negotiation. The language was accepted within 3 days. Garrett's lawyer had seen the filing. He knew what the record looked like. He was not going to waste billable hours fighting a clean offer. The final documents were signed at an attorney's office on a Thursday afternoon, the same meeting I had described in the beginning. Garrett signed first. He did not look at me while he signed. His eyes stayed on the paper. His pen scratched against the signature line. 3 times. That sound again. The attorney watched. I watched. Garrett pushed the document across the table without a word. Then I picked up the pen and signed where indicated. The attorney notarized both signatures and thanked us both. Garrett gathered his copies and stood up. He left before I had finished putting my folder together. The door closed behind him. I took my time. I slid my copies into the folder alongside the property record photographs and a receipt for the first tax bill I had paid 3 years ago. I thanked the attorney. Then I walked out of my car. On the drive home, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I looked over. My father. I pulled over to the side of the road and picked up. He did not ask how the signing went. He already knew it had happened. He said he wanted me to know he saw what I did. Not just today. All of it. I told him I knew he did. He said, "Your brother will get there." I said, "Maybe." I did not say more than that, because I did not know if Garrett would get there. I knew what I wanted to be true, but wanting and waiting were different things. I had learned that over the past 14 months. My father said goodnight. I set the phone down. I pulled back onto the road. I was never waiting for Garrett to admit something. I was never waiting for my father to choose between us. I was waiting for the moment when the record spoke for itself, and I did not have to. That moment came. I was ready for it. I had been ready for a long time. The waiting was never the hard part. The hard part was letting them believe I was patient because I had no other choice. Now they knew the truth. I drove home with the folder on the seat beside me and the road ahead and nothing left to prove. I am over at where silence ends. Have you ever let someone believe you're being patient because you had no options, when really you were just waiting for the right moment to show them otherwise?